Liberal and Marxist Conceptions of the Class Struggle. Note, Prosveshchenii No. 5, May, 1913. Signed, V.I. Lenin. Published according to the Prosveshchenii text. Lenin Collected Works, Progress Publishers, 1977. Moscow. Volume 19. Pages 119-124. The late George Hanna R. Symbol Lenin Internet Archive. You may freely copy, distribute, display and perform this work, as well as make derivative and commercial works. Please credit Marxist's Internet Archive as your source. README. A. Yermansky, a liquidator, poured down an amazing abundance of angry words in Nasha's aria on my criticism of his point of view on the question of the political role of the big commercial and industrial bourgeoisie. Mr. Yermansky, with his vituperation and recollections of old insults, tries to conceal the real substance of the issue. We shall, however, not permit Mr. Yermansky to conceal the substance of the present dispute by recalling undeserved insults to and defeats of the liquidators. For the present dispute concerns a very important question of principle that comes up again and again for 1,000 different reasons. To be precise, it is the question of the liberal falsification of Marxism, the substitution of a Marxist, revolutionary conception of the class struggle by a liberal conception. We shall never tire of explaining this ideological basis of all the disputes between the Marxists and the liquidators. Mr. A. Yermansky writes, the Marxist line refuses to recognize, in the activities of industrial organizations, the class struggle on a nationwide scale as I described them in my article. Why? Because of the absence here of the fundamental feature of the nationwide or statewide, the organization of state power, Nasha, Zaria, page 55. Here is an exposition of the substance of the question given by Mr. Yermansky himself, who does everything possible and impossible to evade that substance. No matter how he may accuse me of distorting his views and of all the mortal sins, no matter how he twists and turns, even seeking refuge in recollections of the 1907 split, the truth will out. My thesis, therefore, is clear. The basic feature of the nationwide is the organization of state power. You do not share that view, my angry opponent. You do not think this the only Marxist view? Then why not say so straight out? Why not counterpose a correct view to an incorrect one? If the view that the fundamental feature of the nationwide is the organization of state power is, in your opinion, only Marxism in inverted commas, why do you not refute my error and expound your understanding of Marxism clearly, precisely and without evasion? The answer to these questions will be clear to the reader if we quote the passage from Mr. A. Yermansky, which followed immediately after the one quoted above. Lenin wants the big Russian bourgeoisie to carry on their class struggle in a different way. He wants them to try to bring about a change in the entire state system. Lenin wants, the bourgeoisie do not want, and the one at fault, of course, is Yermansky the liquidator, who substitutes the liberal conception of the class struggle for the conception of the class struggle in the Marxist sense. Here you have Mr. Yermansky's tirade in full, and it will enable you to get a picture of the evasive liquidator, caught in the act. The evasion is obvious. Have I or have I not indicated correctly the fundamental feature of the nationwide? Mr. A. Yermansky himself was forced to admit that I indicated precisely the substance of the matter, and Mr. Yermansky evades an answer, realizing that he has been caught. And having been caught in the act, Mr. Yermansky evades the question of the correctness or incorrectness of the fundamental feature I indicated and jumps over this question to the question of what Lenin and the bourgeoisie want. But no matter how bold, how daring Mr. Yermansky's leaps, they do not disguise the fact that he has been caught. What have wants got to do with it, my dear opponent? When the dispute concerns the concept of the class struggle, you had to admit that I accused you of substituting a liberal for a Marxist conception, and that I indicated the fundamental feature of the Marxist conception, as including the organization of state power, in the idea of a nationwide class struggle. Mr. A. Yermansky is such a clumsy polemicist, even if an angry one, that he gave a clear explanation, by his own example, of the connection between liquidationism in general and his own, Yermansky's, mistakes in particular and the liberal conception of the class struggle. The question of the class struggle is one of the fundamental questions of Marxism. It is, therefore, worthwhile dealing with the concept of class struggle in greater detail. Every class struggle is a political struggle. We know that the opportunists, slaves to the ideas of liberalism, understood these profound words of Marx incorrectly and tried to put a distorted interpretation on them. Among the opportunists there were, For instance, the economists, the elder brothers of the liquidators. The economists believed that any clash between classes was a political struggle. The economists therefore recognized as class struggle the struggle for a wage increase of 5 kopecks on the ruble, and refused to recognize a higher, more developed, nationwide class struggle, the struggle for political aims. The economists, therefore, recognized the embryonic class struggle but did not recognize it in its developed form. The economists recognized, in other words, only that part of the class struggle that was more tolerable to the liberal bourgeoisie. They refused to go farther than the liberals. They refused to recognize the higher form of class struggle that is unacceptable to the liberals. By so doing, the economists became liberal workers' politicians. By so doing, the economists rejected the Marxist, revolutionary conception of the class struggle. To continue, it is not enough that the class struggle becomes real, consistent and developed only when it embraces the sphere of politics. In politics, too, it is possible to restrict oneself to minor matters, and it is possible to go deeper, to the very foundations. Marxism recognizes a class struggle as fully developed, nationwide, only if it does not merely embrace politics, but takes in the most significant thing in politics, the organization of state power. On the other hand, the liberals, when the working class movement has grown a little stronger, dare not deny the class struggle but attempt to narrow down, to curtail and emasculate the concept of class struggle. Liberals are prepared to recognize the class struggle in the sphere of politics, too, but on one condition, that the organization of state power should not enter into that sphere. It is not hard to understand which of the bourgeoisie's class interests give rise to the liberal distortion of the concept of class struggle. Now, when Mr. Yermansky rehashed the work of the moderate and punctilious civil servant Gushka, when he expressed solidarity with him, not noticing the liberal emasculation of the concept of class struggle, I pointed out to Mr. Yermansky his chief sin against theory and general principles. Mr. Yermansky grew angry and began to use bad language and to twist and turn, being unable to refute what I had said. In doing so, Mr. Yermansky proved such a clumsy polemicist that he exposed himself with particular clarity. Line once, the bourgeoisie do not want, he writes. We now know what particular features of the point of view of the proletariat, and of the bourgeoisie, give rise to these different wants. The bourgeoisie want to curtail the class struggle, to distort and narrow the conception and blunt its sharp edge. The proletariat wants this deception exposed. The Marxist wants whoever undertakes to speak of the class struggle of the bourgeoisie in the name of Marxism to expose the narrowness, the selfish narrowness, indeed, of the bourgeois conception of the class struggle. And not merely to quote figures, not merely to go into ecstasies over big figures. The liberal wants to appraise the bourgeoisie and its class struggle in such a way as to conceal its narrowness, to conceal the failure to include in the struggle that which is basic and most important. Mr. Yermansky was caught out in discussing in liberal fashion the interesting, but ideologically empty or slavishly compiled figures of Mr. Gushka. Obviously, when this was revealed, there was nothing left for Mr. Yermansky to do but curse and wriggle. Let us continue the passage from Mr. Yermansky's article where we left off. It is clear that, in fact, Lenin is the only person who is replacing a study of the real state of affairs by his own qualifications, and also by a stereotyped pattern, based on schoolboy models, drawn from the history of the Great French Revolution. Mr. Yermansky has got into such a tangle that he becomes ever more ruthless in destroying himself. He does not notice the extent to which his liberalism is revealed by this angry sally against the stereotypes of the Great French Revolution. My dear Mr. Yermansky, you must understand that it is impossible to study the real state of affairs without qualifying it, without appraising it from the Marxist, or the liberal, or the reactionary, etc. point of view. You, Mr. Yermansky, qualified and still qualify the study of the good civil servant Gushka in liberal fashion, and I qualify it in Marxist fashion. That is what is at the bottom of it all. By leaving your critical analysis on the threshold of the question of the organization of state power, you thereby prove the liberal limitations of your conception of the class struggle, which was to be shown. Your sally against the stereotype of the Great French Revolution gives you away completely. Anybody can understand that a stereotype or a French model has nothing to do with the matter. For instance, there were not and could not have been strikes, especially political strikes at that time, under stereotype and model conditions. The fact of the matter is that when you became a liquidator, you forgot how to apply the revolutionary point of view to an appraisal of social events. That is where the trouble lies. Marx certainly did not limit his thinking to stereotypes and models taken from the end of the 18th century, but the point of view he adopted was always revolutionary. He always appraised the class struggle most profoundly, always revealing whether it affected fundamentals, always mercilessly berating any timidity of thought, any concealment of underdeveloped, emasculated, selfishly distorted class struggle. The class struggle at the end of the 18th century showed us how it can become political, how it can develop to really nationwide forms. Since then, capitalism and the proletariat have developed to a gigantic extent. The models of the old do not prevent, for instance, the study of the new forms of struggle that I have, in part, outlined above. The point of view of the Marxist, however, will always require a profound and not a superficial appraisal, will always expose the poverty of liberal distortions, understatements and cowardly concealment. Let us congratulate Mr. Yermansky on his devoted and splendid explanation of the way in which the liquidators substitute a liberal conception of the class struggle for the Marxist conception, forgetting how to examine social events from the revolutionary point of view. Notes: see present edition volume 18 pages 56 to 72, ed. C.K. Marx and F. Engels, Manifesto of the Communist Party, Selected Works, Volume 1, Moscow, 1955, page 42.